Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes, and this is the MMORPG Championships 2019. We'll be taking the world's most popular MMORPGs and making them fight to the death to find out which one deserves the title of Greatest MMORPG 2019. They'll compete on everything from graphics to gameplay, dungeons to developers. 16 contestants, 15 matches, and one overall winner. Who will be the greatest MMORPG 2019? Match 1. TERA vs Neverwinter. We open this competition with two titans of the action combat gameplay style. These games left behind traditional tab target combat in favour of fast-paced, reaction-based, adrenaline-fueled fighting. Enemies are intimidating and fights are intense in both games. So let's get to know the contestants. TERA stands for the Exiled Realms of ARBOREA and is a free-to-play Korean action MMORPG developed by Bluehole Studios, produced by Gameforge. It's got servers based in Korea, Europe and North America. The game follows the traditional tank healer DPS Holy Trinity, but does contain several classes able to play as two. For example, the Brawler is a reaction-based tank capable of also putting out massive damage. Coming from Korea, the graphics are heavily stylized, featuring both huge villains and tiny characters. The Eastern influence can easily be seen with the anime-style spectacular fights, and also the controversial Elin class, an ancient race of creatures that just happen to look like young girls. TERA released on PC back in 2011 and was brought to console in 2018. The console release secured its position as one of the premier free-to-play MMORPGs. Neverwinter is a free-to-play action MMORPG developed by Cryptic Studios, based in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting of Dungeons & Dragons, focused on the title city of Neverwinter. The game allows you to play as one of the traditional tabletop Dungeons & Dragons classes, including fighters, rangers, or wizards, and each class is capable of putting out huge damage or being responsible for their own defense. The game's aesthetics draw heavily from the classic Dungeons & Dragons artwork, from medieval towns to vast deserts or underground caverns. It manages to channel the spirit of tabletop D&D well. Neverwinter came to PC in 2013 and was then released on Xbox One and PlayStation 4 in 2015 and 2016 respectively. Now we know the contestants, let's begin. Round 1, graphics. Both games look gorgeous, but it's not just about looks, it's also about the available options and stylistic choices. TERA. The graphics options in the menu contains 18 choices of resolution, 5 preset graphic levels, or if you want complete control, 18 individual sliders for all graphical aspects, ranging from view distance to particle effect intensity. You've got an incredible amount of control over exactly how you want this game to look. The user interface is mostly transparent, allowing the game itself to be effectively full screen. The quest log and action bars don't take up too much screen space at all. However, the general aesthetic heavily relies on thin blue lines or diamond shapes, such as the enemies on the minimap. This gives the whole game a slightly science fiction feel, which can sometimes clash with the high fantasy it's mostly going for. It's beautiful and customizable, but the over-the-top character designs, quasi-futuristic overlay, and overly sexualized character models will put some people off. Neverwinter has 16 screen resolutions, support for 4 refresh rates, 6 anti-aliasing levels, and the ability to draw from your video card or your CPU if playing on a PC, and 20 individual graphics slider options. Neverwinter stays closer to the Western traditional swords and sorcery look, with realistic human proportions, classic high fantasy dragons, and the traditional races of Dungeons & Dragons, elves, tieflings, or dragonborn, all remaining relatively humanoid in shape. Weapons and armour maintain a realistic size, stylized in some cases such as large two-handed swords, but not to the over-the-top levels of TERA. The user interface is mostly transparent, but with graphical flourishes around the edge of the minimap and the hotbar, with traditional fantasy elements like stone, steel, dragon heads, and the action point meter above the hotbar is a 20-sided dice, a nice homage to the game's Dungeons & Dragons roots. The game looks lovely, but lacks any bravery for new character or enemy designs. Sticking so closely to the artwork found in the Dungeon Master's Manual means, while yes, it looks like a Dungeons & Dragons adventure, it sometimes suffers from looking like many other high fantasy games. And the winner of the graphics round is TERA. With both games having a huge amount of customization available, the edge has to go with the most unique one. While Neverwinter does everything well and spans some beautiful looking locations, it can't quite match up to the intense beauty of TERA when arriving in a new city by a Pegasus or fighting a building-size colossus of an enemy. Round 2. The levelling process. TERA has a current level cap of 70, but effectively reaches endgame at 65. Once you reach 65, you'll be able to experience the vast majority of the content. Experience is gained through repeatable quests or story quests, but is mostly found in the levelling dungeons you can queue for early on. The levelling process of TERA is a complete waste of time. The entire game happens at endgame, and everything before that is simply designed to get you there. You'll gain several levels per dungeon and pick up new gear so quickly you won't even have time to equip it before you get something new. It's an enjoyable experience, ploughing through content and feeling powerful, but you never connect with the world around you or the characters during those first 65 levels. You don't need to. The game advances at such a breakneck speed, rushing you to the end game, that when you finally arrive, you feel like you've got off a roller coaster. The skills and items you choose during this process won't matter at all, as it'll all be reset once you get handed your end game items. Neverwinter recently had its level cap increased to 80. From the start of the game, you'll progress at a much slower but more consistent pace. Early game areas are packed with classic and simple quests, killing bandits or finding lost items, but the main story quest of the game will also lead you through some traditional Dungeons & Dragons settings: taverns, rundown slum cities, airships. As you level up, you'll be able to place power points into skills to unlock them. You won't be able to unlock every skill as you go. You'll need to actually pick and choose what build you want to have, but once you reach maximum level, any overflow experience you earn will allow you to unlock additional power points, meaning you will slowly be able to go back and upgrade all the skills you missed. This means the leveling process of Neverwinter does actually matter, as it'll be building you toward whatever you want to be at the end game. Weapons and armor will come and go quickly, but your core character stats will stay with you for the rest of the game. And the winner of the leveling process is Neverwinter. While TERA does have a fast leveling process, it's also pointless. You're rushed to endgame and then told to rebuild everything. Don't worry about making mistakes along the way. Neverwinter may be slower, but choices you make along the way do actually matter and will stay with you. Round 3. Story and Lore. TERA features an original story which hits many of the fantasy tropes. The 2 continents of ARBOREA are actually the backs of fallen titans, and it's the titans' lucid dreaming that creates the world around us. There have been global wars between races and factions, and then a strange race of metallic alien-like creatures called the Argons invaded but was successfully driven back by a coalition of allied races. It's got deep enough lore for the hardcore players to dive into, but casual players will reach endgame without ever being exposed to it. Small local stories, such as farmers needing flowers picked or demons hiding in caves, will be your focus. The tutorial story featuring the girl Anna is probably the highlight of early game storytelling. It's a short but heart-wrenching tale if you bother to pay attention, which, being an action game, you won't have to do. Neverwinter, on the other hand, feeds off the immense catalogue of Dungeons & Dragons stories. Being set in the Forgotten Realms, it exists in the same universe as the award-winning Baldur's Gate series, and celebrates this by having iconic characters such as the travelling wizard Elminster or the brave barbarian Minsk and his miniature giant space hamster Boo in the game alongside you. The story in Neverwinter follows closely to the current plotline of the tabletop Dungeons & Dragons game. When an expansion supplement is released in real life, Neverwinter has the same story, allowing you to play through and virtually fight the enemies you've been reading about. The game begins with you hunting down a stolen crown and will take you through finding and killing an evil lich, or facing off against the famous Demogorgon himself. And the winner of the story and lore is Neverwinter. Despite TERA having an interesting blend of personal sacrifice and world-destroying alien invasion, it can't compete against 30 years of Dungeons & Dragons history. Neverwinter simply contains so many nostalgic throwbacks to famous stories, you can't help but appreciate the richness of the Dungeons & Dragons world. Round 4. Combat. Both games are action MMORPGs, so combat comparisons should be pretty direct. Both games have a lot in common, so which one does it better? TERA has 13 classes to choose from, with each feeling unique, from the tanky Lancer to the squishy Ninja. Each class slowly gains more skills as they level up, and you unlock them using gold. Each skill can then be further improved by adding a variety of glyphs to it. However, you only have a limited number of glyph points, so must build wisely. You can reset your glyph points and rebuild, however, at any time for free. TERA's hotbar can hold all the attacks you'll need. Each attack can be instantly chained into another by using the simple chaining system. On PC, pressing the spacebar makes the next attack happen. This lets even lower skilled players feel epic, and allows high-skilled players to ignore the chaining system and focus on quicker activation of only the hotbar. The enemies are huge and fights fast. Red damage areas appear on the ground, but only briefly, so dodging must be quick. All classes support the party in some way. Characters such as the Mystic can create health or mana orbs on the floor for other characters to pick up, and the Lancer can shield all allies behind them from damage. Mobs are plentiful, but essentially more annoying than difficult. They exist only as cannon fodder. You'll cut through them simply to get to the epic bosses. Neverwinter has 8 classes, with each class having several specializations. This may sound impressive, but several of those specializations are much weaker, limiting their use. You'll unlock additional abilities and attacks as you level up, but you'll need to spend power points to do this, and you cannot respec your power point allocation without paying real money, or having a respec item, given to players rarely during major updates. This lack of freedom in your build pushes players towards learning a single build well instead of experimenting. In Neverwinter, the hotbar is much smaller. You can have 2 powerful daily attacks, 2 at-will attacks, and 3 encounter powers, along with 2 personal passive abilities at any time. This means that while combat is much more limited, choosing what attacks to go into any fight with is part of the strategy. One power may be useless for single target fighting, but fantastic at clearing a room out. You can swap your abilities in and out for free, but only if you've already spent power points to unlock them. Combat will mainly focus on 5-man dungeons with the occasional 25-man raid. Each game features a brilliant action combat system, with attacks and spells needing to be aimed, enemies avoided, and the environment responded to. They share strengths and weaknesses, so deciding this was tough, but the winner of the combat round is TERA. The combat system in Neverwinter is amazing, a great achievement, and allows for fast, fluid gameplay, but it can't quite keep up with the sheer size and complexity of TERA. More attacks, more abilities, more enemies, more everything. TERA truly does dominate the market when it comes to action combat. Round 5. Dungeons and Raids. With such great combat systems, both games contain truly epic endgame dungeon and raid content, but which is best? TERA does have a few leveling dungeons, and you'll be playing with a team from early game onwards, but where it truly shines is endgame. Once you hit level 65, you'll begin grinding dungeons to upgrade your gear, and through various team sizes and difficulty levels, TERA gives you 37 potential instances to choose from. Some of these may be lower leveled and useless to you, but there's always the one above to aim for. The dungeons themselves are absolute spectacles, from realistic palaces to impossible Lovecraftian architecture, filled with time-wasting mobs and breathtaking final bosses. The sheer variety of location and enemy design is stunning. The tactics are complex, and each fight feels just challenging enough to be rewarding and fun. Neverwinter Endgame allows you to journey through the most iconic Dungeons and Dragons places and visit or kill some of the most memorable villains. The Lich Valindra hiding inside her tower, journeying through the impossible palace with upside-down staircases, or the underground lair of the spider demon Lolth. Neverwinter keeps its locations more grounded, more true to the source material, and this can create a sense of nostalgia even if you've never visited. You can recall stories from other tabletop players or fantasy fans, the enemies and NPCs drawing from the positive tropes of the fantasy genre to create something both brand new and familiar all at once. The mob fights are more important, and stronger non-boss enemies can still be quite a challenge. This means progress through a dungeon is never dull. However, the boss enemies themselves often lack that awesome, intimidating presence a boss needs by looking graphically different, with many of them being colour-swapped dragons or larger versions of other similar models. The dungeons in Neverwinter aren't bad at all. They're classic high fantasy, and sticking to the classic high fantasy rules means they're easy to understand and appreciate, but doesn't always push the player's imagination. And the winner of the Dungeons and Raids round is TERA. With a vast number of dungeons and team sizes needed, huge bosses and complex mechanics, TERA takes endgame dungeons to its most extreme. Neverwinter is undeniably fun, the dungeons well designed and enjoyable, but the point of a dungeon is to adventure and then defeat a boss, and in those aspects, TERA stands far above it. Round 6. Player versus player. PvP combat is a staple of the MMORPG, and both Neverwinter and TERA allow you to fight others. But good God, this will be like choosing the lesser of two evils. TERA PvP is first introduced to you in the absolutely insane minigame Kumas Royale, where you, and I'm not making this up, play as a giant baby in a diaper and have to slap the other team of giant diaper babies to death. It only goes downhill from there. Endgame PvP is a barren wasteland on the European server where I played, with a few maxed gear, max level players dominating and newer PvP players having no real chance. Neverwinter, despite a brilliant combat system foundation, contains so few PvP maps you'll get bored of them within the hour, and allows rich players to exploit the cash shop and win via wallet. Spending money on this game grants you victories, it's as simple as that. Early game PvP is rogues going invisible and one-shotting you to death, late game is rich people never dying. Despite both games technically containing PvP, neither of them are good adverts for it, and if PvP is your thing, avoid both of these games. The winner of PvP is no one. Both games have terrible late game PvP. This round is a draw. Final round, unique elements. For the final quickfire round, we'll take the unique elements of each game, both good and bad, and see how they match up. TERA. Pro. Free to play. Looks gorgeous. Complex class system. Huge fights. Con. Overly sexualized characters. Ellens. Weak story. Awful PvP. Neverwinter. Pro. Free to play. Official Dungeons and Dragons world and history. Classic fantasy. Con. Limited combat abilities. Older expansions become obsolete with the newer updates. Very pay to win. Awful PvP. Totaling all points and rounds and taking into account each unique element of both games, the winner in TERA vs Neverwinter is TERA. the titan of action combat, with a huge open world and epic dungeon fights. Free to play on both PC and console, TERA still stands strong despite being released over 8 years ago. Neverwinter put up a great fight and isn't a bad game by any standards, but it can't quite match up to the stylistic and huge world of TERA. Thanks for watching. How do you feel this fight should have gone? If you agree with the result, leave a thumbs up. If you disagree, leave a thumbs down. Let me know in the comments why, and which other MMORPGs you'd like to see battle for the title of 2019 champion. If you like, you can chat to me live on Twitch over at twitch.tv/Josh Strife Hayes. I'm streaming various MMOs weekly. Take care. Keep an eye out for the next round of MMO Championships 2019, and have a great day.